address this topic. It's a pleasure to work with Margaret, and I've not met Ron before, but Margaret is only second to Derek in terms of energy level. And it's good to be on her team because she knows how the government entities function with her position at CHS as Senior VP of Government Affairs, and it's really helpful. And it is a pleasure working with these two to put all this together. Both groups were wonderful, and it was a pleasure working with both groups. They were both really participative and did a good job, had good ideas. Margaret's going to start us off with a presentation.
Thank you, Bill. She needs to be slapped around every once in a while to figure out what to do, though, right? Okay, next slide. What were we asked to do? We had the implementing sustainable funding strategies for public land. And if you've learned anything about me in the last couple days, I need to put things within a framework in order to understand it and be effective. So we kind of posed these questions to our group. We wanted to know what is in place that's working. We wanted to understand if there's some strategies that could be used for others. We wanted to know if maybe now that we've got this wonderful FICOR, we should start thinking about standardization of some of the things. Even though everyone has different authorities, maybe we should still kind of get close on some things. Derek really wanted us to focus on what it's going to take to implement things. Again, FICOR we're hoping is a big part of that. And then we had a really important comment from someone in the Corps. It's like, yeah, we got all this stuff, and if we're going to make all these changes, we got to be realistic. You know, what is it needs to happen for the agencies to make it work? And a lot of times that's culture change. And we're wondering if this kind of lack of funding is going to be enough for people to kind of change their perspectives. And then lastly, what we decided to do in order to present this to you is kind of talk about it both at the local level, at the state level, and things that need to be thought about at the federal level. So that's how we've kind of organized our thoughts. So again, framing some stuff, you know, I think there's not absence of good ideas how to fund things. I think what sometimes we're not always thinking about is how to put the menu out and begin to choose what you need. This was kind of a brain dump that we got, and again, I like to think appropriated, not appropriated. On the appropriated side, obviously you have your own money, and then I call it other agencies' money. And we spent a lot of time talking about Health and Human Services. I actually meant that's Department of Energy, and I didn't know what the acronym was for Department of Education. Is it DOE for both?
Usually ED.
Okay, sorry. Well, I had it backwards. So that's why there's two DOEs up there. Federal Highway Administration, DOD. We talked about people working with the Navy, FEMA, and then obviously state, county, and municipal. And there's probably some other ones up there. Actually, Justice probably should be underneath there as well. And then the non-appropriated fund side, you know, it's kind of a list there. You can see them. It's not the end-all or be-all, but we wanted to kind of help our group think about these things to figure out how to get their juices going. So, you know, it was really helpful to have Ray from the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation in our group because he really got me thinking about how one fund source, the excise task for boating and fishing, he's leveraging it across. We used a spoken wheel, but we couldn't find that in PowerPoint. But, you know, we talked about how financial sustainability really begins at home. We had so many site managers in our groups, which was great, and it's really great to have everybody here. And you know, we really said, and the gal who used to be the head of the Scenic Byway,
Michelle Johnson.
Michelle Johnson really came home. You know, several times she's been here, and she really talks about, you know, it all starts right at home. And we talked about, you know, if you as a site manager sitting at in the middle, and you have 52 weeks over the course of the next year, what are you going to do to go out and find new state agencies that you're not partnering with, new nonprofit partners you're not partnering with? Literally, if you devoted an hour a week to figuring out how to expand your wheel, something is going to happen. So the whole idea that it all starts local is really what we're trying to articulate here. We're going to move it up the food chain, but a lot of it starts at home. So that's just what that's meant to see. Then we talked about things at the state level, and I'm just using Redwood as an example here. You know, Warren Meyer kind of talked to us in our group about how he's working on a federal land in one state, and he has state park people, and their maintenance trucks are passing each other, you know. And so we talked about, you know, really as we're looking at budget cuts, you know, are we looking at the greatest degree of flexibility for cross-agency between feds and states collaboration for service delivery? That's not only can public party A help public party B, that's like, okay, can a private company on a federal land be a maintenance provider for a public agency on a state land? And then also, is there opportunities for nonprofits on state lands who are next to a nonprofit on a federal land to start thinking collaboratively? And you know, we're talking about, is it in maintenance, law enforcement, holy grail, I understand it, but that's an issue. It's happening in some places, search and rescue, it's already happening. This is not saying it's not happening, but the issue is, are there other places where you think it could happen, and we want you to start thinking about it. And we use, and just go up for a second, we wanted to use the example of Redwood State Park, because that is in fact this national and state. The state sits within the national, and Ruth has indicated, you know, that they've really worked hard to, whether it's education or maintenance or things like that, and she can clarify that over cocktails, you know, how that relationship's working. So anyways, that's what we wanted to point out there. Okay, at the federal level, we are still learning about how FICOR is going to work and what's going to be on their agenda and functionally how it works. We saw in Bob's slide, you know, the groups, but we're still unclear, as I'm assuming that the FICOR is evolving, is if there's going to be like subcommittees for things. But if they're not subcommittees, then they need to kind of get on subject areas, I guess. So we kind of grouped focused areas for financial sustainability into two buckets. A global one for financial sustainability and one for infrastructure. So we're going to kind of take you through some of these ideas that we talked about. And to start us off, we have Ron here from the Friends of Rainstown Lake talking to us a little bit about the discussion we had regarding Friends groups.
The main thing that came out with the Friends groups is that you have to try to grow them. Most of the time the Friends group will start with a few people interested in one particular part of your project. And out of that, you have to try to work with them and grow. And it takes years. You don't do this in 6, 7 months, or 8 months or anything. We've been at it 16, 17 years. But you have to try to grow them along with their financial capabilities. We started out mom and pop thing, and we get a grant. We'd spend a grant for something, and work along on membership, a couple of dollars worth of memberships till we got the next grant. So you have to try to grow all that in this capacity and get them broadened out, not just be interested in fish or fish structures, which is where we started on lake cleanup. You also have to work out, and now we have an intern that goes around and gives talks to the kids in the summer season throughout the project, reseeding hardwood forest, things of that nature, navigation lights on a lake that we help buy and maintain, and we umbrella with a couple other groups to do that. The fish clubs do most of the maintenance. We have a 32-mile mountain bike trail. Well, that's fine, we have that, but we have the bike club that maintains that thing for us, so lets our resources go to move on to something else, and now we're in the campground business. So you have to take it and grow them, make sure they have the right kind of agreements. I understand the agreements can vary from agency to agency. Maybe FICOR can get all the agreements, the words are the same on that end of it. Then once again, educate and try to grow these groups, and it does take time. Don't try to get a friends group together and 6 months later they're going to be running some type of a concession. They won't be ready in 6 months. I don't care how you do it. It takes time and the right amount of people, and to try to get a cross section. We were working one time going down this path, and we had a college with a field station going down that path. So we set up a meeting between the two of us. Now we're all working together going down the road, that kind of thing. There was a lot of discussion came out about a public land stamp, and thought that might be good, and also leverage it out with a photo contest. You could get some sponsors to help you out with that. We have quite a few artists around our area that might be interested in something of that nature. The fee continuation was also talked about, and need to fund the improved management and expand the agencies. Of course, we're beating the drum to get the Corps involved. I think there's another group that is in that. Is it BLM or somebody's not in the fee structure of that type of thing. And you learn from each other, really, any kind of friends groups. And I know there's a problem. I know Chad Eller has a pretty good friends group down at Kerscott Lake, but I don't know of too many others. And you get this thing where it's hard for us to communicate among ourselves, and sometimes the agencies can't do it because that's some kind of a conflict of interest. So maybe there's something there that can be looked at, that there could be some kind of a communication setup where we can talk to each other, and maybe we have something that Chad can use down his end, maybe he's have something that we could use. So that's pretty much what I had on that, okay?
Yeah, I think what we had a lot of time and effort talked about this issue, and we decided that there are friends groups issues at the agency level that obviously agencies need to get in order. But we started saying that if in fact the future of public lands is going to be through your friends groups, and universally across the board, the quality and caliber of those groups needs to be improved, is there the capacity of the agencies to work together to, through their foundation, their congressionally chartered foundations, to gather money and resources to get these folks trained? You know, is APPL the place where we're going to try to say, you know, someone could go out and get a foundation grant for 5 years for friends groups? You know, this is which really is a transition to this next issue. But the issue is, we know it's a problem. We know they're a big part of the solution. Are we looking collectively across agencies of how to improve and enhance that capacity? The issue on the foundations, as somebody said, we've got four congressionally chartered foundations. And each of them have different capacities and different authorities, and maybe there's things that need to be relooked at these foundations, and that maybe there needs to be some kind of, all the foundations need to sit together and be part and listen and figure out what role they can play in the ability to enhance the funding situation. So that's really what we're talking about, is can we get the foundations working together and start looking at best practices from each other. And then the other issue is, you know, what would happen if in fact we got all four foundations to go in together on for a grant for a key cross-agency recreation initiative, whether it's education or health. Right now in the nonprofit giving world, the bigger bang you can get for your $1 buck, the better off you're going to be. You know, everyone's in their own turf world, everyone's got their own foundation mandates, but could you agree on one thing that you go after collectively and experiment? That's what we're talking about, just experimentation. So that's what that last line is. This whole issue of each congressionally chartered foundation in some cases is the intermediary for these hotel checkoffs. You know, is there an opportunity to begin to understand? Derek's lived this pain in various places where he's tried to advocate it. You know, this is low-hanging fruit theoretically. And what are the things that we could, again, learn across the agencies about what it takes to do it, and begin to give the field, or whatever level is appropriate, the tools to do it. And then then the last two, and then the other thing is, you know, this was something thrown out, it has to do with checkoffs. It's the federal 1040, you know, is there an opportunity again? Right now we don't really have a centralized entity to make people check off $1, but what would happen if we did? See it sometimes in states. This big issue came up. We're in the renewable energy world, and we have people putting new drilling or new solar arrays or new wind power farms, and we are learning that, you know, this is an important initiative for the current administration. We don't know how it's going to happen for the next. But if there's new opportunities on federal lands that are being provided to new markets, that maybe not in the initial lease, but maybe if legislation is being written for this, there's an opportunity for there to be some language there that upon contract renewal, there can be a portion of these leases that goes to either mitigation at the site for those projects or into portfolios. And then finally, you know, David Brooks Brown, sorry, Brooks is another guy. He really, you know, he opened our session with a very, you know, simple question, and he said, you know, what are you missing? How much are you guys going to get cut? And it really raised this important question of, you know, if you're thinking about the future, you need to know where you are right now. And how efficient are you in delivering your services? And that's really an agency by agency issue. But, you know, we have seen what's happened in Service First. There has been some cross use of agencies, each other. But, you know, as we start trying to become efficient with the dollar, what are those areas that you have standardization on that you can work on? So those are some of the things that we thought could be under some sort of financial sustainability focus. And then Gilbert's going to talk about what we talked about on the infrastructure side.
Well, on the infrastructure side, we tried to think outside the box as much as we could, but one concept was to have a centralized bonding strategy. Maybe each agency could pledge 5%, 10%, whatever the number might be, of their fees to go to a fund. And then multiple agencies would be able to use that fund to leverage themselves for bonds to improve or to maintain properties. But I know in the marina world, if we just had to take our cash and go out and build marinas, and we could never borrow money and borrow more money than we had, if we didn't have some kind of an income stream, an NOI that we could project to a bank, that we could make payments or whatever, we would never be able to build marinas because it just gets really expensive. But collectively, you could swing a much bigger club in that leverage world than you can independently. And we thought that would possibly be something worthy of consideration. With regard to transportation, we were blessed to have Kurt Dowding in the room with us, who is with the Department of Transportation. He's the or Federal Highway Administration, I should say. He's a branch chief. And the existing program is possibly going to change. There's proposed legislation that would change that. The existing program is Federal Lands Highways Program, and under that falls Park Roads Programs, a Refuge Roads Program, and Forest Highway Program. The new legislation is divided into two areas. One would be Federal Land Transportation Program, and the other would be Federal Lands Access Program. The Federal Lands Transportation Program would be strictly for federally owned and maintained transportation facilities and nothing else. The second category, Federal Lands Access Program, would be for state and county owned and maintained transportation facilities providing access to public lands or to federal lands. Under the first category of the proposed legislation for Federal Lands Transportation Program, there's actually two categories. One would be a non-compete category, and the other one would be a competitive category, if you like. But in the non-compete, the theory would be that some percentage would be set aside for two groups, and those two groups would be the National Park Service and Fish and Wildlife. So they would be handled separately in this proposed legislation as it currently exists, differently than others. The second category would be the competitive portion, and this group would include the Forest Service, Army Corps of Engineers, and Bureau of Land Reclamation, and they would take whatever percent was left over after it was determined what would be assigned to the non-compete group and have some kind of means of figuring out how to disperse that among the agencies. That is the way that is proposed. You know, I said the second major category, and all that was relative to the Federal Lands Transportation Program. The other part of that proposed legislation, as I said earlier, was the Federal Lands Access Program, which is for the state and county-owned maintained facilities providing access to federal lands. But its members would be the state, the counties, and the federal highways. So there would be funds available in that category that wouldn't be separated in a compete and non-compete arenas. Implementation, it was pointed out that agencies needed to get their priorities in order. You need to know and be organized as to what you want if you're going to be requesting funds, and you need your priorities in order and be able to say this is emphasis number 1, number 2, number 3, etc. And it was also pointed out that it's critical to get your partnering collaboration together. And each of you at your own individual sites should be working on that partnering that Margaret pointed out earlier. You know, that can be your Chamber of Commerce. It can be the hotel operator down the street where people stay when they're visiting your facility. You know, someone had mentioned that their local hotel charged $1 and went to the program, and that was quite helpful. That basically concludes that, but I will tell you that Kurt is here, and he said that he would answer questions, and appreciate him staying. He passed up an obligation to be here in case there were questions, but he also said if you had any questions, you could call 1-800-FHA. that's an opportunity for you as well. So,
Yeah, I don't know if that answer gets to him, but the idea is they're there, and we actually began to create some relationships, which is why we're here, to create understanding. So that's kind of the ideas that we have in front of you, and I don't think there's probably any time for questions, but if there is, we'd love to have them.